My guest today is Tej Dosa. And Tej is one of the people who's been on this podcast the most because he started with episode 1. We also he interviewed me on episode 46. And we've had also a couple of other incredible conversations, which you can find in the archives. But this was such a magical conversation and an incredible way for me to end the year. And it'll definitely be a conversation I listen to again for me to begin the year, because whenever I talk to Tej, there's always so much knowledge and information I gain in that I missed the first time. And it's why I'm so grateful to have the chance to record these basically conversations with a friend. Tej is a marketer, and a copywriter, but more than that, he's just an explorer of human beings and an explorer of himself. He's an explorer of the mind and psychology. And in this conversation, we spoke about creativity, being alive, his highest ROI habit, his misunderstanding of the surrender experiment, why pain is stored in the body, why it's always raining joy. He even gave me some podcast tips. This was the longest conversation I'm pretty sure I've published on this podcast. And I am so grateful that it was the full 2.5 hours, because there's so much value in here. There's so much nuggets and wisdom. And I really hope you gain as much clarity and introspection and just joy from this conversation as much as I did, because it was truly an incredible experience. So check it out. Let me know what you think on Twitter at Hey Danny Miranda, or drop it in the comments below if you're listening or watching on YouTube. And if you enjoy it, please share it with a friend. Share it with somebody who you think is introspective and kind and wise, and let them know that their impact on you with this conversation, if you feel so called to it. So thank you so much for listening, and I truly appreciate you. This conversation is brought to you by My First Million. My First Million, similar to me and Tej, it's just two friends going back and forth, Sam and Sean do, and it's really remarkable. Their chemistry, their ability to talk to one another, and their ability to talk about entrepreneurship and creators and where the world is going and technology. I always enjoy it because I always learn something. And if I don't learn something, I get the enjoyment of listening to two friends speak. So check out My First Million. But before you do, enjoy this conversation with Tej Dosa.
How are you, brother?
Dude, I am overlooking Austin right now. I'm just fucking high on life. It's crazy. It's crazy what a change of environment leads to in terms of how you think differently, the things you're building. And so just really grateful to be here.
How long have you been there for now?
About 2 weeks. So
Damn.
Just getting into it. But I plan to live here for at least another year after this. I just got a 2-month sublease from a friend. Mm-hmm. And then just gonna hopefully live here after that is up.
What has been your first 2 weeks like?
It's just, man, the people here are so kind. Just like, I feel really blessed to be in walking distance, like a gym, a sauna, grocery store, bookshop. Like, I'm just like, yo, what is happening? Like where everything is so convenient, it just feels so good. And so, I'm just so excited by life. Like, just feel like these were the first 2 weeks for the rest of my life. And that feeling of like, oh, something new is happening. And it's exciting to be in that energy.
Do you feel more in alignment in Austin than you did in New York?
1,000%. I mean, like, that's the best way to put it. Like, in alignment. It's just like the things that I'm doing every day is just like, oh, these are things that are leading to the growth of who I want to be. And, we've talked about this it's just like when you're doing the things that are in alignment with the person you want to be, the result of that, the thing that comes out is just happiness and excitement and joy. And so it just is phenomenal to be in that energy and to be living in it, even if, you know, some of the moments are like, not every moment is perfect, but it's just like the ethos of what I'm living is just so in alignment with the person that I want to be. So I'm really grateful for that.
It's wild too, because like just like listening to you and your voice, I can like sense the vibes and the good energy just emanating in your voice. And I think that's like a dead giveaway at any point in your life. When you're on like a natural, spontaneous conversation, is such a good reflection of where you are in your life at that moment in time. So yeah, I just love listening to the energy and just picking up on that vibe.
Hell yeah, bro. Tell me about you. We haven't spoke for a few months, so I'd love to know, like, what have the past few months been like for you?
The past few months have been very exciting. I've been doing a bunch of different things, so let me just see. Let's see what comes to mind. I haven't drank alcohol since July. That's one
Oh,
thing.
wow.
This second thing is I've started up more so a hedge fund style direct response operation with a partner. That's the second thing that's super exciting. Third thing that's been very exciting has been refinding my love for content and also just the YouTube game in general. I like mapped out and created just the rough outlines for like the first 100 videos. So I'm super excited to get that out into the world. Aside from that, I've really just been learning how to live and how to orient my life towards truth as opposed to distortions or bullshit. I've also been exploring death and life in a much more intimate way than ever before. And I feel like a kid again that's like learning how to live for the first time. And it's been a remarkable experience thus far.
Oh, there's so much to dive into there. What happened with the hedge fund, direct response hedge fund? I don't know what the hell that means, but I'm so curious.
Basically, for like the last, like ever since I got into the direct response game, since I was like 14, I feel I've been cultivating a very strong skill set with respect to what people want, what it is that they truly need, and also developing and building the skill sets that can communicate that value at scale in order to generate the biggest bang, not only for a business, but also the world. So I felt like for a very long time that I wasn't using my direct response skill set to its utmost power. I was kind of playing along other people's games, like kind of just looking out into the market. You know, people make 100K a month, whatever, and you're just like chilling there, and you're like, yeah, this is like cool, everything's fine, money's not an issue, you're doing your thing, and everything's good. And deep down inside, I always had like this fucking intensity. It's kind of like how we used to feel when we would do 75 hard, right? It's like I either want to go all fucking out or I don't even want to play the game. And I felt like I was operating in the middle, like kind of playing in accordance with other people's rules. So it was kind of eating at me in a very raw and real way where I felt like a fraud, but for a different reason. You know that quote? It's like, if you don't bring out what's inside you, then that thing will eat you. I felt like I was being eaten alive on the inside, and I needed to express this, and I needed a vehicle that will allow me to actually create the biggest bang that I feel like I'm capable of creating. So this hedge fund style direct response operation naturally came as a result of that, and it's with the partner, so it's not essentially on my own, but it's been in the works for like the last year, but now it's like full throttle, balls to the wall, no fucks given, let's take over the world type of vibe.
that's, that's awesome. It's funny because I feel like you also thought about content that way, in the sense of, you put out on Twitter recently, like, I noticed myself playing other people's games when I consumed a lot of content, but I want to play my own game in terms of content. And I sense that shift happening, especially with the YouTube videos. They're really unlike a lot of YouTube videos, and they're clearly from you, from your being, which is really cool because it's like you're not only doing that in the direct response world, I guess, with the hedge fund, you're also doing that with the content world as well. It's sick.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's like been my main learning point as of like the last couple of years. I felt like I was kind of in a little bit of a limbo phase where I was like really figuring that out because I felt like I got really good at playing the game, but it wasn't necessarily my game. So even if I won the game, it felt like I lost the game.
What's a practical example of what you're talking about?
Okay, so a practical example is like, let's say I want to make X amount of money. I feel like I know exactly what to sell, the exact copy, the exact marketing, everything exactly the way I can create it that would produce the biggest bang and generate a fuck ton of money. It's the game. It's tried and true. You know exactly what to do and what order to do it. You know if you do X, it's going to produce Y reaction in the people. I feel like that is so fucking dialed. But if I play that, I feel like I'm a fucking actor. It's like there's no heart in it. There's no soul in it. And even with the content side of things, I think I felt into like a little bit of a trap with like, you know, you start seeing the algorithm and you start seeing all this bullshit and it's like you start writing for the algorithm as opposed to writing for the people or for yourself. And I was like, my whole thing was like not just to make it to the top of the world, but to make it to the top of the world on my terms. And it felt like I had sacrificed my terms a little bit.
It's funny because I was talking to Sean Millay, who up and coming TikTok legend. He's like a comedian and a filmmaker and all this stuff. And he said that I think he's done over 300 million views, something crazy. But he said that, you know, he went viral with one type of video and then he knew he could create that type of video over and over and over again. But he said that he started to feel when he exploited the formula of what he knew worked, he started to feel like he didn't enjoy that as much as creating something from scratch. And I thought that was such an interesting concept of like, oh, wow, here's this guy who, you know, could just exploit the same formula over and over again, but some part of him is rejecting that. What is going on there from your perspective?
Yeah, I feel like I noticed that like first with like some of my favorite rappers, right? They would always say it. Like for instance, somebody like J. Cole or even Kanye, where the fans would be like, man, I want the old J. Cole, the old Kanye. And I would watch their interviews and they would be like, man, like for instance, I think Kanye's one of his albums that a lot of people like is like 808s and Heartbreaks. And he's like, do you know that if I wanted to, I could produce that same exact album every single time and everybody would love it and it would be number one for eternity? Like I could do that on repeat. And he's like, I don't want to do that because that's not fun. And then I think that was the time when he came out with like that Yeezus album, which was like completely different. And people are like, what the fuck is this? We want the old Kanye. And I felt like the reason that happens is because I feel like we are creators. So if you cease to create, you're not really, if you already have like a tried and true recipe, copywriting formula, so on and so forth, you're not really creating. You're more so, I kind of view it like you're cooking. You're taking different ingredients and you're putting it together to build the same dish over and over again, right? You're not like experimenting. You're not coming up with new novel ways. And I think over time, what that does is it dims the light inside you and you become more robotic-like as opposed to a creator. And I feel like in your deepest sense, you are a creator. So anything that takes away from that is going to make you feel less than because it's not the truth of who and what you are.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think episode 61 with Kamal Ravikant, I was talking to him about, you know, why he stopped doing media, why he stopped doing podcasts, why he stopped. And we might have spoke about this before, but just the idea that he was repeating himself over and over and over again, and that I brought to his attention, it's because he wasn't creating in the moment. He was just repeating an old version of himself. And that was like it felt like a huge aha moment for him of like, oh, it's the creation process that is really what we're all seeking. And so I've started to study creativity, and I've and I've tried to figure out, why am I studying creativity? Is this pointless thing? Is this like what is at the heart of me studying creativity? And I'm curious, like, what do you think? Like, okay, so we're creators at our core. Like, how does somebody become a creator themselves? Like, how does somebody get off the scripted path of what they're doing and start to create more?
I feel like there's like two answers. One is like the cookie cutter bullshit answer, and then the second answer is the real answer. Right? So it depends on like where people are. Like sometimes the cookie cutter bullshit answer is exactly what they need to hear because that's what's relevant at that stage of the game. And then there's the real fucking answer, which is like, oh fuck, like holy shit, this is going to completely change everything with respect to how I live my life and who I take myself to be. So I feel like at all times with all questions, there's at least two different answers for everything.
Okay, so what's the cookie cutter answer and what's the real answer? Like,
yeah,
like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like the cookie cutter answer, the reason why it's a cookie cutter answer is because it tries to replicate the real answer. So the cookie cutter answer is like, oh, you want to be more creative? Oh, like when you wake up in the morning, like don't plug your senses into social media. Oh, you want to be more creative? Like spend more time alone. Oh, you want to be more creative? Take more walks. Oh, you want to be more creative? Study creativity or read some books or like expose yourself to things that inspire you. That'll make you more creative. Oh, you want to be more creative? Draw for 30 minutes a day. I feel like these are all tactics and they're beneficial in the sense that, yes, they will make you more creative, but they won't necessarily make you a creator. And I feel like that's the distinction. So the real answer, the answer I didn't want to explore for a very long time because it's like you don't get rewarded for it in society. So it kind of feels like you're hitting the pause button on the video game of life to seek the real answer. But actually, the real answer gives you all the juice, for all the juice comes from the real answer. And the real answer, before you do anything, is to ultimately discover who and what you truly are. When you discover that, then everything you thought to be true, everything you took yourself to be, how you expressed yourself, where you come from, what you create, what you don't do, what you do, it all becomes restructured. It's like that example that I use all the time is if a lion believes himself to be a mosquito, then he's going to create like a mosquito and he's going to try to eat food like a mosquito, but he'll never be fulfilled for he has the appetite of a lion, but is eating like a mosquito. So I feel like you can either mimic the external behaviors of creativity or you can go deep down inside and realize who and what you truly are, which is more in tune with being a creator. And then from there, everything becomes an expression of your creativity. You can never not be creative. This conversation is creativity in action. Going on a walk is creativity. Cooking food is creativity. Waking up, how you get out of bed in the morning is creativity in action. It's all creative. It's all creative. And I feel like most people, when they're like, I'm not creative, I'm like, what type of bullshit is that? What do you mean you're not creative? Creativity is like the only thing there is.
I think it's because sometimes it's like we get accustomed to doing the same thing over and over again through a period of weeks or months, and then in that process we sometimes feel like we're not creative because we're doing the same thing over and over again with little idea of how it is slightly different in this moment, right? It's like if somebody, like I love Chipotle, right? So I eat Chipotle over and over and over again. It's hard for me to be like, oh, I'm creating in this moment by eating Chipotle because I've done this over and over and over again. But if I was eating a new meal, I might be like, oh, I'm creating a moment with somebody in this by not eating Chipotle or eating something else. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's like because we do the same thing over and over again, it ceases. It's hard for us to notice the difference between time A, B, and C because they seem so similar to us. Like a better example might be like going into an office every day. like doing a job that you don't like, it's like it's hard for somebody to be like, I'm being creative in this moment because I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Absolutely. And shout out to Chipotle. I actually just had Chipotle too, so good timing on that one.
Same, bro. We're in alignment.
But I think even that example, I think that's like a symptom. And I think the real root cause is like, even if you're eating Chipotle every single day of your life, I feel like the real issue is, you know, when people are like, I'm in a rut, or I'm just doing the same old thing day in and day out. The real answer from my perspective, and I don't know anything, but the real perspective from my side is, when you're in a rut or you're eating Chipotle 100 times in a row and you feel like you can't be creative, it's because you're not actually there. You're not even there anymore. It's become mechanical. So, you know, it's just like the routine people fall into: wake up every morning, go to the washroom, brush their teeth, get dressed, go to work. And over time, what ends up happening is not the routine that's the problem. It's not eating Chipotle that's the problem. It's over time, the part of you that's alive goes to sleep, and now you become more robotic-like. So this is why I always tie it back into discovering who and what you truly are and staying anchored and grounded in that. For when you stay anchored and grounded in that, you can't fall asleep anymore. You can't go into a rut. You can't go into robotic mode. You can't lose touch with that. I mean, you can, but it becomes less likely because you know that's the most important thing. And once you're in touch with that, which you can describe as a authentic presence, you realize that this authentic presence is constantly being refreshed and renewed every single moment. It's not like you came from the past and now you're in the present and you're going to go in the future. It's like a Google Chrome browser when you hit refresh, and each moment is refreshing like that each and every second of your life. So every moment is being created anew. And the more you remain in touch with who and what you are, which is the presence, the more you realize that this meal that I'm eating from Chipotle, even though I've ordered this high protein bowl for 100 days in a fucking row, it's fucking arising freshly in this moment. And I think once you start experiencing that, not as an idea, then you're like, holy fuck. It's like when somebody first takes some type of psychedelic and they're like blown away at the most simplest of things. Like I've seen friends do it and they're just staring at their hand for 3 hours and just admiring the lines in their hand. It's the same fucking hand they had for the entirety of their life, but now they're actually seeing the hand because they're actually there. And now it becomes something completely different than, oh yeah, that's just my fucking hand. I have two of them and it's whatever. You know, so I feel like it's easy to fall into the trap of, oh, like, you know, because routines are required for success. There's nothing wrong with routines, but it's, are you alive while engaged in the routine? You know, when I, like the first few times I did like 75 hard, I was just trying to get it done. And then I did it again. And I'm like, man, this time I do 75 hard. I want to be alive and present as fully as possible for every rep, for every exercise, for every step, for every meal, for everything. And it was a radically different experience. Then it becomes 75 hard is not a mental toughness challenge. It's not an exercise program. It's not a fitness program. It becomes, I hate the word, but a spiritual journey of discovering who and what you truly are. And anything can become that, whether that's 75 hard or eating a high protein bowl from Chipotle for the 100th time.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. It's like you don't want the routine to suck the life out of you. How do you do the routine with more life, more energy, more presence, more joy, more excitement, and make that, like, how do you infuse life into the routine? Because that, I think, is where all the magic lies. Because if you can infuse life into the routine, you can do anything, because routines are necessary for success in some, depending on what success you're talking about. But it's so common to see successful people have routines, but it's also like they don't let the routine suck the life out of them. And so, like, from your perspective, what do you think is like the keys to not let the routine suck the life out of you?
This is something that I'm like exploring for myself too in like real time. But what's been like really helpful for me personally is to ask myself, where am I meeting this moment from? Right? So it doesn't really matter what the moment is, whether it's a routine you've done a gazillion times or something fresh that you're doing for the first time. The most important question for me is like, how am I meeting this moment? I feel like most of us, and myself included, sometimes we can focus so much on the moment that we don't acknowledge where we're meeting the moment from. And where we meet the moment from is what determines the success or failure of the moment. I mean, no moment is a failure, but even in like the relative sense, in terms of like feeling fulfillment or joy or succeeding or whatever, I think it's not entirely about what you're experiencing. It's a matter of how you're experiencing it. So when I ask myself that question, I usually come up with one of two answers. The first answer is I'm meeting this moment from a place of conditioning. Like I'm taking myself to be a character, and this character is my personality. It was created from the past, and now these are the goggles that I'm experiencing this moment through. So everything feels old and stale because those are the goggles that I'm wearing while I'm meeting this moment. So that's one option. And when I'm operating in conditioning, it's almost entirely because I'm disconnected from my physical body. I'm not in my body anymore. I'm entirely in my head. And as a result, my consciousness is identified with the image that is arising from the past. And now it is overlaying onto my experience. So when this happens, I'm not even experiencing the moment fully. I'm projecting old garbage onto this fresh moment to the point that I can't even see what's in front of me as it truly is. I can only see my projections. So that's one way I meet the moment, which is an inferior way to meet the moment, because then you slip into routines and you go in a rut and you go to sleep to who and what you truly are. And the second way to meet the moment is from a fresh place, a new place, a place of creativity and a place of ease and joy and delight. And that's ultimately what I like to call from a place of presence. And I know I'm meeting the moment from a place of presence when I'm in my body, when I'm experiencing my feet actually making contact with the floor, when I'm sensing my breath, when my mind is open and there's like no agenda of where I want this conversation to go or how I want it to flow. It's more so just a natural expression, and I feel more in tune with who I am. And from there, everything feels like it's new, even if it's old. So that's how I tend to go about not letting routines kill the light and zest of life that we all have as children, that is just radiating and pouring out from our entire being. But it's fucking hard, bro. Sometimes it's like my conditioning is like, just be a fucking robot, fuck this presence bullshit, and just get what you need to get done. But whenever I do that and I fall victim to that, that's when I lose the game, even when I win the game, if that makes sense.
Why do you think that you're like our natural inclination? Maybe our natural inclination is not to be a robot, but why do you think you find yourself slipping back into that place?
That's a really good question. I feel like the real answer is because I'm scared of the unknown. So being a robot, I know I've done it 1,000 times. I know exactly how to go like fucking Navy SEAL mode. Obviously not Navy SEAL, I'm not at the level. But like, like hardcore fucking discipline and just like turn into a robot, get whatever I need to get done. I know exactly what that experience feels like. And it's normal to me. It's familiar. It's easy to slip into that mode. But the other mode of being more open to life, being more here, being more present, feels like I'm opening up into more of the unknown. And the unknown is scary. I don't know what's going to happen. My normal faculties, my normal sense of self is no longer in control, like I tend to believe when I go full robotic mode. So it's like, that is one reason. The second reason is sometimes I look out into society and I'm like, the robots seem to be winning more than the people that are tapped in. And I'm like, maybe I need to become a robot now. And then I like wrestle with that, but it's like ultimately bullshit.
Well, like, what's an example of like robots winning without, I guess, throwing anyone under the bus? Like, what's an example of like who's a robot that's winning? Like when I think of people winning, I think of like people who are full of joy, who are full of presence, who are just like radiating something from whatever they're doing, whether it's just like sweeping the floors or just chilling on a rooftop or whatever it may be, doing their job with presence. That's what I think of when I think of like a winner. right? So I'm like trying to
Absolutely.
picture like who's a robot that's winning. I'm having a hard time thinking of any, but like maybe like what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say because I don't experience what they're experiencing, right? So what may look like a robot to me may actually be full of presence for them. So it's tough to like actually I can't put myself into their shoes, but more so I mean robotic existence in the way of not necessarily anything you're doing out in the world, but how you're meeting your experience. So if you're not like in tune with yourself, if you're not fully present to what you're experiencing and where you're meeting this moment from, and you're just letting conditioning run the show, then that to me is like more robotic like. And I fall victim to that all the time. But that's what I mean more so about operating like a robot. It doesn't matter if you're successful or you're a failure. I know successful robots and I know failure robots, right? It's more so about how you're meeting the moment. So if you're just run entirely by the conditioning of the past, that's what I mean by robotic like conditioning or being more of a robot.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's it's crazy. I like one thing you said in there that really stood out to me was just about the importance of like paying attention to your body. Like you mentioned before about your feet touching the ground or just like your fingertips, like a very good way to get to a state of presence or non-robot like behavior is like literally just noticing little things about how you're attached to the physical world. What else comes to mind?
Yeah, I feel like that is honestly so important, and it's where I actually fucked up for a very long time. Like I remember I started bro, I was so fucked. I didn't even realize that I had a body.
What when did you
Like
realize you had a body, Tej?
bro, I just found my body like 3 years ago. Like no bullshit either.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, okay, so obviously, like I know I have a body. Like I look in the mirror, I see a body, but I'm saying more. So you know what I mean? Like in the sense of actually experiencing the body fully. So I got into like all this stuff like with like meditation and whatever and like reading these books in like 2011 because I wanted to make a lot of money and I thought like whatever, like maybe this will help me. A lot of entrepreneurs were like, yeah, bro, just meditate, it'll fucking help you. I'm like, fuck it, you make like hundreds of millions of dollars, I'll just listen to you. And then it was actually very helpful. It like made me more creative. I started getting breakthrough business ideas, big ideas for marketing, promotion, so on and so forth. And I was like, man, this is fucking epic. I'm really doing it. This is so cool. And I would even read like deeper books, right? Related to like spirituality or like whatever. And I would think I got it. I'm like, yeah, I completely understand. I'm like, you know, non-duality, like there's nobody really here, like it's all emptiness, so on and so forth. I'm like, yeah, I understand, I got it. But it was all mental in the sense that I was perceiving everything through the mind. I was like a walking bobblehead. I was entirely head, I was no body. And the reason I was like that and the reason it stayed like that for a very long time is because when you re-enter the body, it's not all sunshine and rainbows initially. And the reason why is because when you start to re-enter the body, you start to experience all the old wounds that you didn't process when they happened because you were too young. You couldn't process it at the time. So the body kind of feels like a war zone. It's like, I don't want to go there. It's fucking scary down there. You know, so it's easier to retreat to the mind. And that's where our comfort zone comes from. Our comfort zone, in my opinion, is like this place that we build in the mind that disconnects us from the body, because once you disconnect from the body, you disconnect from reality and you disconnect from the present moment. And now you find more safety in your mind as opposed to what's actually happening in the here and now. So for a very long time, I would just perceive and experience a lot of this mentally and think I understood, which I didn't because I wasn't embodying anything I was fucking learning. And then when I started getting more into the body and actually experiencing those old wounds and then going deeper and experiencing what exists beyond those wounds, because the wounds aren't ultimately real, I started to actually experience what the books were saying, actually experiencing what all these religious texts or advanced beings were saying. And that's when I started to realize that the body is the doorway to the truth. You know, initially I was like, fuck the body, renounce the body is pointless. Like, I'm consciousness. What the fuck is a body? But actually, the body is what allows you to dive deeper and explore and experience in a sensate way the truth experientially. And then the body becomes a means of embodiment, of embodying your realizations. So to kind of loop back around to your question, what I like to do is just like feel my feet on the floor and experience my arms and legs as fully as possible while I'm engaged in daily activities, because the arms and legs are more neutral. Like if you're feeling your heart, there's probably a lot of like suppressed emotions there that may not be useful to feel while you're trying to like get something done, for instance, because that may not be a right time. You're on like a business call and you're like feeling your heart and you're just like feeling so sad or like, you know, deep alienation or pain. It may not be the right time to feel that, but feeling your arms and legs is neutral. There's like really not much going on in your arms and legs. There's not as much tension or strain. So feeling my arms and legs throughout the day and just like breathing into my belly has been honestly life-changing. My highest ROI habit by far is to feel my arms and legs as much as fucking possible. Because when I feel my arms and legs, I truly understand what Michael Singer meant when he wrote The Surrender Experiment. I thought I understood. I didn't fucking have a clue, bro.
What realization did feeling the arms and legs, like how did you get greater understanding of the book or just life in general when you did that?
Yeah, so like when I first read the book, I feel like the book is good, but I feel like if you just read the book, it's really easy to fool yourself. And I felt like I fooled myself. I mean, the course is beautiful. I think the course is epic. It really puts what the book was trying to say, in my opinion, into the proper context, right? So when I first read the book, I would fall into like these weird thought patterns of like, oh yeah, now I'm surrendering. Oh no. Does this mean I'm surrendering? Does this not mean I'm surrendering? Oh, maybe I surrendered too much over there. Oh no, I can't surrender to that. Just like weird fucking bullshit where my mind was still running the show. And I'm thinking I'm surrendering. I'm like, yeah, oh, this cool thing happened. Yup, it happened because I surrendered. Yup, look at me, I surrendered. And I would just fucking go on these fucking loops. It's like I was a crazy person, bro. Like it doesn't even make any sense. And then when I started sensing my arms and legs, I realized something deeper with respect to what it is that you're actually surrendering. So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say you're thinking of taking a new action that scares you, for instance, right? And it's like out of your comfort zone. You're doing something for the first time. You don't know how it's going to go. Their mind is trying to talk you out of it. It's like saying a lot of things from the past. Hey, remember when you tried something similar, it ended up like this? Don't do this. It's going to end in embarrassment. You're going to make a fool out of yourself, so on and so forth. The mind is saying all those things, right? So now somebody that just read the Surrender Experiment, they would be like, what does it mean to surrender? Like, what are they surrendering to? And what are they surrendering, right? So what I realized when I would sense my arms and legs is when I sense my arms and legs and I look and listen, me and the moment become one. In the sense that there's no more any subject and there's no more any object. Just what is what is. So from that place, let's say I'm about to embark on something new and I'm sensing my arms and legs, that makes me more in tune with what it is that I'm actually experiencing live in this moment. And let's say I'm experiencing fear or I'm scared or whatever. Previously, when I wasn't in my body, when I was just the bobblehead, I would become confused. Like everything would be so confusing. It's like these energies, this fear. It's like, oh, like do I listen to this or do I listen to reality or do I listen to some book? It's just like a bunch of conflicting thoughts that make the process so much harder. But when I'm sensing my arms and legs, subject object dissolves, there's only the moment, and what I surrender is like the default conditioned reactions. So when I'm in my arms and legs, I find myself flowing effortlessly with reality. And what I'm surrendering just by sensing my arms and legs is like the programmed reactions that are arising live in the flesh that are based on the past and not this moment. That is what I'm surrendering. It's not something I'm surrendering to. I'm just surrendering the bullshit so more of the truth can come forth through me and allow me to meet this moment from a place of presence as opposed to conditioning.
I think you're surrendering the default reactions, I think is a really interesting way to put it. And I haven't really thought about it from that perspective before. Like surrendering your default reactions.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that was very, very concise.
Well,
Damn, are you a podcast? Are you a podcaster, bro? That was very concise. That was very concise of you.
It's your words. I'm just highlighting them. I'm curious. I'm curious, like why you think that pain gets stored in the body.
Why pain gets to start in the body is because I feel it's like the same reason why if you can't digest something, then I feel like it stays there. So I feel like the reason pain gets stored in the body is because when you're young, you're completely present. So you feel everything, right? That's why kids are like, bro, I was on a walk this morning and it's pissing rain. It's foggy. It's cloudy. Socks are wet. You know, like one of those days. And like
Vancouver,
this kid,
baby.
this little girl. Yeah, Raincouver, as they like to call it here. And then this little girl is like jumping up and down in the puddles. And then literally 30 seconds later, there's two adult males running. And then one guy looks out into the horizon and he's like to the other guy, man, it sure is depressing. Right? So I was
why?
like, fuck, man.
I don't understand this. First of all, I don't understand this. I'll let you finish your point, but I don't understand why we've associated certain weather positive or negative. Like, it truly does not make any sense to me.
I absolutely agree. I think like the whole premise that I'm trying to figure out is like that girl really knows how to live, and what happened to the adult where he sees that and he experiences that, and his default reaction is, man, it sure is depressing today. I think that just taught me, like, it just teaches you so much about life, just that simple observation in 30 seconds. But anyways, what I was saying was related to pain. I feel like since an adult, I mean, since a kid can like feel everything, certain experiences are too much for the kid to experience. Like I remember one time I was on another walk and like this mother was pushing a very young toddler on a stroller and there was like a minor little bump that was happening, and to the kid, like I could see his expression, it felt like the end of the world, just like a minor tiny bump on the road as the stroller is being pushed. Like it was very scary for the child, and that's just a little bump. Now imagine something like seeing your parents fight. It doesn't have to be a crazy fight, but to the kid, it could feel like the end of the world. It's too much to handle. The parents are superheroes, so it's like too much to see, too much to handle. So a bunch of these little things that we don't think are that extreme as adults because we're so numb as adults. As a kid, you feel that fully, and it feels like the end of the world. And because it's too much for you to handle as a child, that pain becomes undigested, and then it lingers on, and it becomes stored in the body because you suppressed it, so it's gone underground. So when you start to experience your body again, all that pain from all the past experiences you've gone through that weren't digested start arising to the surface, and that's why pain starts coming out more and more. But pain is actually a gift because the pain, once experienced, clears, and then you discover what exists beyond the pain, and what exists beyond the pain is the most magical, epic, beautiful, joyful thing in the universe, and that is you, my friend.
What is the opposite of pain?
That's a really good question. The first thing that jumped out, and I don't think this is true, but the opposite of pain to me is like when you're dead and you don't feel or experience nothing. Pain to me is just like a certain electric charge that signifies life. I remember one time, again, I don't know if this is true, but I remember one time I was in school and I was listening to one of my teachers, and I think it was like a health related class, and he's like, hey, if you ever get like stabbed, or if you ever, I don't know why he was saying this, but he's like, if you ever get stabbed or if you ever get shot and you don't feel pain, that's when you should worry. If you do feel pain, that's an indication that you're probably going to live, because your body and everything is still firing and you're still receptive to it all. But if you don't feel pain, then it's signifying something else. Ultimately, like your body's kind of checked out and you might be dying. So I always found that very interesting.
Yeah, the reason why I asked, because it's like pain, we talk about pain getting stored in the body, but I'm also curious if joy gets stored in the body as well. We just don't think about it, or it's like why do you think that joy gets stored in the body, or like the opposite of pain gets stored in the body? I guess the opposite of pain would be death in your eyes. So I don't know if death gets stored in the body, but I'm just thinking about like joy. Like, do you think joy gets stored in the body as well?
I feel like when it comes to like joy, and it comes to love, and it comes to strength and power and compassion and confidence, the way I like to see it is it's like the sun. The sun is always shining, even when what you're experiencing are clouds, right? So it kind of ties back to what I was saying earlier with respect to discovering who and what you truly are. The reason that's so important is because what you'll discover is what you truly are, or a manifestation of what you truly are, is like the joy, is the love, is the laughter, is the strength, is the power, and so on and so forth. And the sun is always shining. So the joy is always there. The strength is always there. The compassion is always there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you experience it all the time because of the distortions that are in the way, just like a cloud can cover up the sun. But the joy is always shining, and it is always there. Like, the way I like to think of it is like it's always raining joy. So if I'm not experiencing it in this moment, it's because of how I'm holding myself. It's how I'm meeting the moment that is preventing me from experiencing the joy that is raining from the sky all the time.
It's always raining joy. Like what made you believe or know or think that?
What made me not believe, what made me know that is I experienced my heart as a sun that was constantly radiating and overflowing with joy, and it was independent of anything that was happening in my life, and it was always the case forever and always without fail. In good times or bad.
And like, how'd you come to that realization? I feel like the world would be a happier place if more people came to that realization.
The way I came to that realization was first I stopped being a bobblehead and I returned to my body, and then I experienced the pain that was in the body. When you're experiencing the pain, it's not fucking fun because you think that's all there is. You're like, oh, why do I want to feel this? It's fucking shitty. Like, what's the point, right? Because you don't know anything else actually exists. So it's like all there is like pain and like fear and like suffering and tension. And you think that's all there is. But as a result of experiencing that, what you realize is there's something deeper there. And what that thing that's deeper is like the sun that is always shining, like the joy that is always there, the love that is always there, the care and compassion and strength and power that is always there. So I experienced it personally through embodying more presence, inquiring into what I'm experiencing, whatever it is, whether it starts off as like boredom or pain or restlessness or frustration or anger. Eventually, if you stay with your experience, it will take you to the promised land. And the promised land is the sun that is always shining. And the sun that is always shining isn't independent from you. It's what you are. So that's what I mean with the sense of If you truly discovered yourself to be a sun that is shining 24/7 with joy, how would that change your practical life? How would that change how you tweet? How would that change how you podcast? How would that change how you send a fucking cold email? It would change everything. That's what I mean by, in my opinion, it's like the highest ROI thing to discover, because it completely restructures the totality of your life in all facets.
Yeah. It certainly would if we all acted like joy was constantly overflowing. It would make us a lot more willing to do quote unquote risky things, right? Because oh, at the end of the day, I'm still joy. I'm still presence. I'm still overflowing with love. So it's like whatever happens inherently doesn't matter because I'm still flowing with that joy. And it makes you just much more comfortable with risk, I feel. Like that whole mindset, that whole mantra.
Yeah, 1000%. For me, what I also noticed was like it also changes how you live your life in the sense that you realize there's nothing to gain. Because usually, if you feel like you're missing, you know, like it's common fact that like the richest people or the most successful people in current day and age, for most people, not always, but if you like read their biographies or their autobiographies, you'll usually find like a very difficult childhood, and you will see, or they'll tell you themselves, that it was a lot of insecurities that motivated them to make it big, right? So it's like if somebody goes through a lot of pain in childhood, they will become disconnected from the joy that is always there, for example. Then they'll feel like I have to create XYZ in the world in order to experience joy. So now it's like in order to get Y, I must do X. So everything becomes perceived through this lens, you know? In order to feel strength, I must go to the gym to lift weights. In order to experience love, I must get into a relationship with a certain type of person, then I'll feel love. In order to feel power, I must build $1 billion company. So as a result of this, you kind of subscribe to what I call a peasant-like existence. Joy, power, strength, love is what you are, but because you don't experience it, now you need to rearrange furniture in the external world in order to get back in touch with it in limited drops. There's nothing wrong with going to the gym, of course. There's nothing wrong with a relationship. There's nothing wrong with building a business, but your entire orientation is fucked up because you're taking yourself to be something you're not, and now you're basing your entire worldview on this paradigm that you have never once questioned. You question everything, but you don't question this, and this is the most important thing to question. So I feel like once you start getting in touch with the joy that is there all the time, regardless of good circumstances or bad circumstances, now it's no longer of like, oh, I feel so empty and useless and deficient inside, so let me build a business so I make $1 million so I can feel powerful. It's like, no, I'm radiating with power. Now, how does this power want to overflow into the world? What does this power want to create? And from there, what you end up doing and building is radically different than the first way of life, because now you realize it's like the Mike Posner quote, there's nothing to gain and there's nothing to lose. So it's more so an expression, an overflowing of what you are. And that is what leads your creations, as opposed to doing something to get something.
It's an entirely different way of approaching the world, but I don't think, like, I feel like, at least I think that it can oscillate, like it can change for like moment to moment. Like moment to moment, it could be like, all right, I'm going to the gym. One day it's like I'm going to the gym because I feel love in my heart and I'm excited to attack the workout. Another, it's because it might be like I want to be stronger, right? I want to be more powerful. So, do you think that it could also be like a spectrum of like moment to moment, day to day, as opposed to like black and white of, okay, you are this way or you're another way? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I feel like for like the people that have probably gone through this process for like lifetimes and lifetimes, I feel like for them it may be more stable. Like, for instance, like I haven't read the Bible, but I read like other books on Jesus, for instance, and there was just so much love in there when people would come across Jesus's presence. It was just emanating and overflowing love. Because in my opinion, he was actually rooted in the truth of who and what he truly is. And from there, he was showering the world and everybody that came across him with that loving presence. But for like myself, obviously nowhere near Jesus's level. I'm constantly rotating between overflowing and feeling like I'm full of lack and I need to get something in the world, or I need to, like the gym example that you used. And that's what ties directly back to the question that I asked myself originally, which is, where am I meeting this moment from? Right. I noticed that the reason it's kind of more of a spectrum in the sense of sometimes I'm overflowing and sometimes I'm not, isn't necessarily because of the externals. It's because of how I'm approaching this moment internally. So I can either approach it from the lens of truth, or I can have some distortions in the way. And neither is right or wrong, in my opinion. It just is what it is. But I think some ways are much more funner to go through life. Some are much more truer. And I feel like orienting yourself towards truth is actually what creates the most epic life possible. So for me, I try to be more oriented towards truth. But yeah, bro, like even in a minute, I'll probably like rotate between both like a dozen times, right?
Yeah, but like when you say truth, like what the hell is truth? Like how do we determine what is true and what's not?
I feel like truth applies at all levels. And I feel like, I was thinking about this earlier. I was taking a shower and I was thinking about like learning and like books, and I was like, man, why do I want to keep reading new books? Like, why don't I just live the truths that I already know to be true? If I just focused on that, as opposed to like, constantly try to acquire new knowledge, it's like the knowledge is fine, but if you're not even living what you already know to be true, then what is the point of accumulating more knowledge? For the living of the truth is what actualizes the truth. So I feel like truth as a whole is it takes care of all levels. So from the relative standpoint, let's say you're building a business. There's a true way of building a successful business, and there's a false way in terms of the daily activities. You hear this all the time. Some people start a business and then they spend their entire life, entire time creating logos and shit like that. That's like useless. Building websites, it's fine later, but like it's like not what's really required. And deep down inside, they know what's required. What's true is to like create an offer and go out and sell it. But they don't want to face that truth because it's uncomfortable. So it's easier to make a logo on Canva, for instance, and act like you're doing something. Same thing with health. You know what foods are good for you, which foods are bad for you, but you want to delude yourself. You want to act like you don't know the truth. You know the truth. Same thing with sleep. Same thing with meditation. Same thing with everything. So from a relative standpoint, I feel all of us, both you and I, everybody listening, everybody that makes up this planet, if we just live the truths that we already know, not perfectly, but to the best of our abilities, then right now our lives would be radically different than what they currently are. For truth is the only thing that's real. And I think the more you become accustomed to constantly seeking out the truth, it's like, okay, I want to build a podcast or I want to create a Twitter account. What's truth? How do I approach this from a true perspective in terms of what does it actually take to build something to the level that I want to build it? What are the real action steps, not the fake bullshit that feels good? What does it actually take? For instance, for you, it may be like pushing 50 fucking clips a week. That's the truth. So that's what I need to live. Not this bullshit of like, oh, I'm going to record a podcast when I feel like it. Kind of like what I do. But like, It's like, what do you truly want? And then
Yeah.
are you willing to live in accordance with the truth? And it's as simple as that. And I feel like it starts on the relative, but then it goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the absolute truths. And I feel like truth is the one vehicle that connects all realms.
Okay, so this is taking us from the very deep to the very surface level, but like, as something I was curious from your perspective, like how would you suggest I take this podcast to the next level as somebody who is seeking truth and as also somebody who's a marketing genius in yourself? Is like, what should I do to take it from, it's pretty decent. Like I've made a good, I've started a good thing. I've done something that I enjoy doing, but I want to take it to the next level. What is the truth for how you believe I should get there?
Yeah, I feel like there's like truth on what's like currently true with respect to what is currently on your plate and what is the best actions to be taking. And I think you're taking those actions to the best of your ability currently speaking. And that would mean things like what you're already doing. You're focused on the podcast, you're publishing new podcasts, you've updated the studio, looks fucking fantastic, by the way. The interviews are fucking fire, which is the most important thing. You're getting a lot of realness and depth out of people. I actually had an interesting insight, maybe I'll get into later, when I was watching one of your podcasts, but I think you're doing everything correct in that sense. You're putting out clips and you're putting out short form content. You're playing the game fully. But I feel like in order to make the quantum leaps, you have to invent a new game. And what I mean by that is like you're maxing out already on what people would deem they need to do in order to build a successful podcast. You're scoring A+ across the board, right? But in order to truly take this to a next level, you have to create the next level. And what I mean by that, like the first thing that came to mind as you asked that question was, I feel like it's very easy with anything that we do to become boxed in to that paradigm. So for instance, it's very easy to classify what you're building here as a podcast. But I think if you think of this as a podcast, how you grow this podcast becomes limited to how a podcast is typically grown. And I think as a result of that, it boxes you in a little bit with respect to what you do. I feel like in order to come up with quantum leaps, it starts by changing how you view what this is. And I think what this is disrespectful to call this just a podcast. From what I've seen, from the impact it's had, from the interviews, from how people show up on this podcast, to your presence, to your love and joy. Now, I'm not telling you to go out there and be like, this is church. This is church for the people. I'm not saying that, even though I may think that like in a certain aspect. I'm saying that how you grow this is contingent on what you take this to be, and how you view this determines how you grow this. So what I would do before you go into the tactics, before you entertain any of that noise, is to redefine or crystallize, because I think you already have done it, what this truly is. And how do you scale this far and wide? Because normally when you grow this, people are like, they group it into a podcast, and rightfully so. It's like, you see a clip on YouTube and it's like, oh, another podcast. Like, do I want to go listen to another podcast? Or, oh, here's another interview, or here's this, or here's that. But I think that you're in a completely unique league. You're in a one-of-one league, and you need to come up with the marketing that allows people to recognize that, hey, this is not just a fucking podcast.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And the first thing that came to mind when you were speaking is like, this is a deep exploration of human beings. And yeah, some podcasts do that, but it's not often how we think about podcasts in general. It's like deep exploration of the human spirit, of the human in general. And so if I can, when you frame it as a podcast, do you then do the things that you would do to grow a podcast? But what if you're playing a bigger game than that? And then it's like, oh, well, if you're deeply exploring human beings, what are the ways in which you could deeply explore a human being that isn't, an interview in the traditional sense of sitting down in a studio? Oh, do you go to someone's place of work? Do you find someone where they're most comfortable? Like you start thinking of it differently when you start thinking of it bigger than a podcast, which is a really interesting insight. And maybe that's like the quantum leap is taking it out of the game of podcasting, taking it into the game of something bigger or something different.
Exactly. Like, I feel like you're in an entirely different lane, and I feel like you can take it to a place where it becomes mandatory for the biggest names in the world to come on the Danny Miranda show. Because it's like, I'm trying to think of an example where, you know how sometimes you like, certain people are so good at curating a certain type of vibe that you want to see your favorite people in that setting.
Yes. Yeah.
And they could have done a million podcasts in the past, but until they're in that setting, you don't really know them like you want to know them. You haven't really seen that side of them yet.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like you need to start curating vibes, and you've already done it. And what's more remarkable when I read your comments, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube, is the people can sense it. People feel it. The people that have been following you from day 1 or day 200, doesn't matter when they joined the party, they sense something is different here. They sense that this isn't an ordinary show. So what I would recommend is you reverse engineer what is it that they're sensing, curate a vibe entirely around that, turn it into a unique experience, and now it becomes not just another podcast, but something the biggest names in the world have to do, because once they do it, it allows their audience to see them in an entirely new light. And more importantly, it allows the person that is coming onto your show to experience themselves in an entirely new light. And as a result, people are like, man, I like how I am when I'm on the Danny Miranda show. I like how I am. I love myself how I am on the Danny Miranda show. So I think that's like a gift that you're actually giving. That was the insight that I had when I was watching some of the podcasts you've done. And with certain people, I had seen them on other podcasts, for example, and I could tell that they were loving themselves more on your show than on the other shows.
Yeah. I think it's because I'm giving someone permission to love themselves, or permission to like be at peace with what they're at right now, and like spreading joy on that. And I think it's how I got to that place is by really caring about that person in that moment, and also before, so that they can really feel like, oh shoot, like I really do feel loved in this moment. Like I really do feel appreciated. And it's a gift, I think, that most people don't ever experience. And if nothing else, like I hope that people take that and like who listen or watch and take it to their own life of like, how can you give the gift of listening? How can you give the gift of being with somebody, of being present with them to the best of your abilities in every moment to that person? And it's what I'm hoping to do. Like, that's the vibe I'm trying to put out there. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like that is the number one thing to focus on, because it feels like with certain people, like even Joe Rogan, for instance, I don't really classify that as a podcast. It's like people are like even like it's more so it's the Joe Rogan experience. Like even you know how certain people, they're always like, man, you need to go on Rogan. Like they could have watched 1,000 episodes. They're like, bro, you need to go on Rogan, because Rogan brings out something that no other podcast can bring out. And obviously it's like the biggest podcast, whatever. But I don't think it's just that. I think Rogan has done a remarkable job of curating a unique experience that separates him from everybody else. And he's authentically himself. He's doubled down. It's not a hack. It's who he truly is. And I think you can do that in your own right, in your own way, at a much higher level, personally speaking, than Rogan. If you were to double down on the juice that makes the Danny Miranda show what it is.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to spend 2023 doing it to the best of my ability and trying to. I think also another thing about it is that the work outlines the path, in that there's no way that I could have got to this experience or figured out this is the vibe that I'm trying to get, or these are the type of people I want to have on, without doing the work. And so often I feel as if with anything in life, we expect that we're going to know the path before we start, but it's actually the work itself that creates the path. Is that ring true from your experience on this floating rock in space?
Absolutely. I feel like the work outlines the path, and also deeply connecting to yourself outlines how you navigate the path, which births new insights and ideas that you otherwise may not have got if you just followed the work. And I think that's what you've done a remarkable job of, combining both.
And it's like, okay, Brett, this is, I don't know what this is, episode 290 something, right? It's like, all right, if I just keep at it at 3 episodes a week for another year, will it be 400 something episodes in 3 years? So it's like all right, if we know that to be true, and you get value, and you get knowledge, and you get understanding from each additional conversation, like, what's stopping you? It's the only thing stopping you is getting people to talk to me for an hour. And it's just like the path that I see ahead might not actually even be the path, because I haven't done the work. Like, I think back to where I was in December of 2021, like literally just a year ago. It's an entirely different person in some respect. And I'm just like, how is that possible? That 1 year ago I could be so different. And I'm not that different, but different enough where the circumstances were different, the things were different. And I just think that it's like the work creates a different human being inherently. And so it's just fascinating, man. What were you up to in December 2021? How would you compare Tej of today to Tej of 2020, December 2021?
December 2021. Bro, I can't even remember what I ate yesterday. This is a con of trying to be present all the time, dude. My memory is fucking trash. But December
go to
2020.
Go to the Google Calendar. I find that like our Google Calendar. I don't know. Do you use Google Calendar?
Sometimes, but I think I use Rome quite a bit in
okay.
December of 2021.
I feel like the calendar shows, for me at least, like, what am I valuing my time with at this moment? And so if I go back, I don't know what it's like, but it's interesting to see what we spend time on in that moment versus this moment. So what is your Rome?
It's actually
show?
I was trying to find like a journal entry. I was just trying to find something from December. I thought that would be epic, but I couldn't find one on Rome. But oh fuck, oh shit, this is very interesting.
Of course,
bro. Get this, right? So I go on Rome and I go on the search and I'm like, I just punch in December 2021 because trying to find like a journal entry or whatever. And I find this write-up that says end of year targets. And it says due date December 31st, 2021. And the first thing that I see on this list This is crazy. First thing I see on this list is develop a book with Danny Miranda.
Yo, what the fuck? That's wild.
I don't think I wrote anything else in December. Yeah, only for this year. Yeah, that's what I see on December.
That's wild.
Damn. That's fucking interesting as fuck. But yeah, I think I was like, to answer your question, how I am now, I feel every year, I feel like I'm living a new life. I could be doing the same things. Like I could be doing the same external actions, but I feel like I'm a completely different person. And bro, I've just been cherishing the moment so much more this year, whatever it is. Doesn't matter if it's a good moment or a bad moment. It just feels so fucking good to cherish the moment while also living your life in such a way that you're taking care of business, you're taking care of your duties, you're taking care of your obligations, so you can continue to cherish the moment of tomorrow. You're not screwing over your future self.
Why do you think that you're cherishing the moment so much, in particular this year?
I think I'm cherishing the moment so much more this year is because I've started to gain more of an appreciation of how everything is temporary in the movie of life. You know, there was like this Japanese concept, I forgot what it is, so I won't even try, but it said something along the lines of, what if what you're doing is the last time you're doing it? How would that change what you're doing? Right? So whether it's like having a sip of coffee, imagine that was your last coffee. How would that change your experience? Sending a message to a girl or sending a Twitter DM or going on a date or whatever. Imagine that it was the last time you were going to do this. Because I remember having experiences where I felt like I was going to die. And obviously the first thing that arises when you feel like you're going to die is losing loved ones. And it doesn't feel like you're going to die. It feels like everybody you've known is going to die when you're dying. Everybody that you've known, everything that you've enjoyed doing, all your creations is all going to die at once. You know, I heard this good quote. It's like, you ever had a really big breakup? And people are like, yeah. They're like, it sucked. And the person's like, yeah, it was terrible. And then they're like, imagine breaking up with every single person you have ever loved at once. That's how it feels like to die. Where everybody that you've loved is dying. And that's how it felt personally. It didn't feel like I was dying. It felt like my entire world was dying. So as a result of that experience, it put the world in a new light. You know, even just dealing with people and just genuine interactions. Sometimes, like in the past, I would like try to manipulate in a way of like even trying to like inspire, like trying to say something to motivate people, even like loved ones or whatever. And it would be like manipulation a little bit. I wasn't fully cherishing that moment. I was always trying to do something else or get something. But when you start to cherish the moment, it's radically different. So my viewpoint on death has allowed me to cherish the moment more and recognize that, hey, one day, I don't believe I'm going to die personally, but the world that I've known and love so dearly and so deeply is going to die and be taken away from me. So if that's the truth, then to live in accordance with the truth, there is no other option but to cherish this conversation with Danny Miranda as if it's the last time I'll speak to Danny Miranda.
When you talk about you don't believe you're going to die or you don't believe in death, how did you come to that realization? Or like, and then why do you believe that or know that?
This is a little bit dark, but when I realized, this is going to sound fucked up, but when I realized, like experientially, I couldn't die, the only thing I wanted to do was to die, but it was the only thing I couldn't do.
What do you mean by that?
So I'll get back to that after. But what you were saying with respect to why do you believe you're not going to die? And it kind of ties into what I just said. But why I believe I cannot die is because what dies is what was never real. What is real is the only thing that is real and is the only thing that doesn't die. So it depends on what you mean by dying, or what I mean when I say I believe I will never die. If by that I mean this character Tej, who's a copywriter, who's talking on this podcast, who is X feet tall, who weighs X amount of pounds, whatever, who does this, who lives here, I don't mean I will never die as in that will never die. That's going to die probably in like, I don't know, give it like 50, 60 years or whatever. That thing is going to check out. It's a wrap for him, right? It's game over, bro. I'm sorry. It's game over.
Maybe we'll extend the lifespan by then.
Yeah, maybe. And then I feel like that, like the body obviously is going to die, just like when you ride a car for a very long time, eventually you got to replace the car, right? So the reason why I feel like I will never sounds so funny. The reason why I feel like I will never die is because I feel like I've experienced the part of me that is not in time and space. The part of me that can never die because it was never born. Experientially.
How do you experience that? How do you experience that?
I experienced that by getting back in my body and doing inquiry with the teacher for 1 hour a week, every single week, and also during my evening times. In the evenings, I like to just do it by myself for like 15, 30, 45, 60 minutes and just let the truth of the moment take me deeper and deeper and deeper into the treasures that exist inside of us. And one of those treasures is making contact with the part of you that was never born and will never die. And the kicker is that part feels, at least for me, I'll just speak for myself, more me than anything else I've ever experienced myself to be. It's like, oh shit, maybe this is what they meant when they said, hallelujah, I'm home, baby.
Why? Why does that feel like more you? Why does that feel like home? Going to that deep place.
That's the mystery. And the answer, I don't know. But if I was to wonder about it, I feel like we're not actually from the earth. Like, you know, when people are like, yo, bro, where are you from? They're like, oh, I'm from Vancouver, Canada, or I'm from, you know, at a higher level, it's like, I'm from Earth. But how are you from Earth if you only spend like 60, 70, 80 years? Where were you before you were on Earth? Some people will be like, I was dead. Cool. But I don't think so. I feel we're not actually from Earth. I feel like we're from something much more magical and truer that is actually beyond time and space. And I feel like when you do inquiry, you start to access the part of you that is unstained by any experience that happens in your life. And you realize that you are timeless. You realize you're kind of like the light that beams onto a projector screen, giving rise to the movie that you experience. But the movie is being birthed by the light, and the light is what you are, and the light is independent of the movie that you're watching on the screen. And when you get in touch with that light, you can't help but feel like you're at home, because when you feel like you're at home, you feel like you're fully yourself. You know, after a long day at work, people come home, they chill on the couch, open up a beer, whatever, and they take a sigh of relief, like, I'm home. Now they don't have to pretend anymore. They don't have to wear a mask anymore. They can be who they truly are. It's like the quote, you are who you are when nobody is looking. When nobody is looking, that's who you are, because now you can be fully yourself. So when I do the inquiry, for instance, I go through all the distortions of what I take myself to be. And the more I do, the more it unravels, because truth is the guiding force. Nothing else is real besides truth. So the deeper I go, the more I start entering that dimension, not even a dimension because I don't even know what that means, but like this timeless space, and it just feels so me. And when I'm there, I'm just like, bro, just hallelujah. That's it, bro. That's fucking it. And from there, everything makes sense. So if I meet the moment from there, nothing ever really happened like I thought it did. Just like in a movie, the person that gets shot didn't really get shot. It was just the light changing forms, creating the play of somebody getting shot. And the light is what you are. So from there, it's like, yeah, I can never die. I don't believe in death, because that light is timeless. It's not even in this reality, and that is what I am. So how can I die if I am that, and that was never born in this world?
Whew. You know how you're talking about like how when we come home and we have a beer and we finally can be who we really are because we're in the presence of ourselves and we feel comfortable. How do we become who we really are in front of other people?
Bro, that's my number one mission, is to figure that out. Because I can't do it. I can't do it because the highest is to be fully in the world, but not of the world. Because when you're not of the world, then you're fully yourself in any moment, and you're fully living. You're building a podcast, you're building a business, you're posting tweets, you're doing whatever, but you're not of this world. You're operating from that place of being home all the time. And that to me is where all the learning happens. Because personally, and I'm not knocking it, I think it's very easy to renounce yourself from society and for you to be yourself. You know, you're just in a cave, chilling out, doing your thing. It's cool, it's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But to me, I don't like that at all. I want to be engaged fully with my life while not being of this world. I want to feel like I'm at home all the time, regardless of what I'm doing. And when I'm not doing that, kind of loops back around to what I started this conversation with, where I was like, bro, I started tweeting for the algorithm. I wasn't operating like I was operating from home. And I feel like people can sense that, because my home is your home, for we share the same home. And I think what you're doing with this podcast is you're actually bringing people home in a way, in your own way.
Damn.
Just saying that just reminded me of the Ram Dass quote where he's like, we're all walking each other home. Yeah. And I feel that's why I said earlier that viewing this as a podcast is disrespectful, because podcast is of the world. A podcast is of the world, but what you're delivering is not from this world.
It's fascinating. When you take me back to the realization of like, oh, I'm tweeting for the algorithm. Like, how did you realize that? And then like, what do you do when you noticed that?
Yeah, so I'll give you a real example, very crystal clear in my memory. So even with like a lot of the copywriting tactics and strategies that I've discovered and learned and tested throughout the years, it's easier to know what will kind of gain traction and generate a lot of response and what necessarily won't. And when I'm playing the direct response game and it's independent of me and it's just my brand and just my business and just the offer, I'll go full direct response. I don't have a problem with that. But when it's more so connected to who I am, an expression of that, I feel more like a prostitute if I was to do that. And what I experienced was I was like, I'm going to go full algorithm mode. I was like, fuck it. I'm going to go full algorithm mode. And then I did like 2 deep work sessions for like 2 hours each. And I think I wrote, I don't know the exact number, but I opened up a Google Doc and I went full algorithm mode and I created like 10 to 20 threads that were just purely for the algorithm, that everything that I learned about direct response was telling me that these are going to hit and this is going to fly. And then I took those threads and I scheduled them like one a day for like the next like 7 days. And the next thread was going to be posted like in the morning of, let's say, like tomorrow. As that was like scheduled, I went to sleep. The next morning I woke up, I opened up wherever it was scheduled, and I fucking deleted those threads. I was like, this is bullshit. And I never published it. I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I completely lost the plot.
What made that realization happen? Like, okay, I lost the plot. Like what made you say that to yourself?
What made me say that is because I feel like there's a difference between W's and real W's. And I feel like real W's are eternal W's that you can actually take with you once the movie of life ends, and fake W's die with the character once the movie of life ends. And that doesn't necessarily mean there's a disorientation between the real W's and the fake W's. It just means that if I know myself to be eternal, if I know myself to be joy and love and power and strength and confidence and all these qualities, if I know myself to be that, then I'm here to express that as fully as possible. I'm here to live a true life. I'm here to live a real life. I'm here to create genuine impact by being myself fully, for that is the highest, and all that I experience as a result of that will lead to real eternal W's, for it will make me a greater being. I will actually evolve. But if I'm not doing that, and I'm just trying to maximize my bank account, which there's nothing wrong with that, if I'm just focused on that, if I'm just tweeting for the algorithm, sure, these threads may go viral, but once the movie of life is over, I wouldn't have actually grown, nor would I have expressed what was real in me, and I would have just been food for evolution. I just lived, did my thing, and then I died. But the real potential I never tapped into. I never let it unfold in my life. So for me, it's like reach the top of the world, but do it fully and truly and in a real way that honors the only thing that matters, which is the truth of you. Because it's like the movie is going to end one day. The movie is going to be over. It's not going to matter how many likes or followers or money you made. Everybody knows this. But what will matter is, did you express the truth of you? Did you live in accordance with that? Did you have self-respect? Did you have self-dignity? Did you honor your truest gifts and express those at scale to the best of your ability in a way that only you could do that? And I feel like if you can say yes to that, that symbolizes a good life. And just as importantly, those W's that come from the truest, deepest part of your being are the only W's that I believe actually stay with you once the movie ends. I don't believe when people say you can't take anything with you at death. I think that's bullshit. I think the only thing you can take with you at death is who and what you are. So if you don't evolve and grow that, then there may not be much to take with you at the time of death. But if you do evolve and grow that, there's a lot of treasures you can reap from this game of life and enjoy for an eternity.
What do you get to hold on to from your perspective at the end of when your body dies? What could you actually bring forth with you? Like what stays from your perspective?
Yeah, it's all my perspective. But what I believe what I believe stays with you at the time of death is all your issues, all the things you haven't worked through, all your problems, all your troubles, all your psychological distortions. Those stay with you after death. And also your realizations, what you realize to be true about who and what you are, and also all the realness that you created in this life. So for instance, I believe that if I'm on this podcast, I wasn't going to use that word, but I couldn't think of another word fast enough. If I'm on this...
That's truth with a capital T.
If I'm on this podcast right now and I experience the quality of love arising, love for you, love for the listeners, love for myself, love for the creation we're creating in real time, that love that is being manifested in this moment, I can take with me once it's all over. I can take the love, I can take the laughter, because the love and the laughter and the connection and the gratitude and the confidence and the whatever it is that we seek is what we truly are. So the more that I create that, the more I experience the restructuring in terms of waking up to the truth. Oh, fuck, that is what I am. And that's not like a belief. It's not like, all right, tomorrow I'm going to start living my life like I'm love. I think that's like cheesy and bullshit and like, not it. I fell in the trap. That's what I'm kind of saying that. But that's what your consciousness is infused with. So what your consciousness is infused with is what you're left with at the time of death. So if my consciousness is infused with love in this moment, then there'll be love at death. What else would there be? But if my consciousness is infused with anger and resentment and distrust and lack of harmony and hatred, then at the time of death, I'll be left with that. For the consciousness is eternal, but the body is finite. So whatever I infuse my consciousness with, I'll have with me once the movie ends. So the more I infuse my tweets with love, for instance, the more my consciousness gets infused with love. The more podcasts you record with love in your heart and laughter and joy and connection, the more your consciousness gets infused with that. And the more that happens, the more eternal W's you collect in the video game of life.
Okay, so speaking now about not eternal W's, but about YouTube W's, content creation W's, you started to put yourself out on YouTube. What went into that decision?
The way I like to see it is everything that's in the world, whether it's YouTube or whether it's building a business or building a podcast or a relationship, is an opportunity to collect eternal W's.
Love it.
So that's why I'm not a fan of renouncing anything, because even business, for instance, like some people are like, oh, Tej, you're just focused on money. I'm like, yeah, probably. But I'm like, yeah, guilty. But Yeah, it's true. Like, I'm not gonna lie and be like, yo, I don't like money. I love money. I love money. I love the power it gives to me. I love everything about money. I don't care. But I also love business because as a result of building a business, it allows me to experience all my issues that I otherwise wouldn't experience if I was just meditating all day. When you're in the fire and you're going through like, a client headache, or you get like a nasty letter in the mail, whatever. Never happened besides when I was like 16. But anyways, like when you're in the fire, like it just brings out so much undigested material that is in your consciousness that otherwise wouldn't arise because there was nothing to bring it out. So the real work for me is using the small work with the lowercase w, whether that's YouTube, business, whatever, to bring to life all the stuff that is inside me so I can process it, so I can clean it. And as a result, use the lowercase w work to express more of the truth. So for YouTube, for instance, I felt like I had been writing for a very long time, and the writing was cool and I enjoy it and I love it. But I wanted to. It's like a J. Cole lyric. He's like, "What's the fuck is the point of talking to people who already agree with you?" It's like you're just making noise and everybody's like, yeah, this is cool. But I felt like I wanted to take some of the vibe or the juice and put it into a new vehicle that could touch more people. So YouTube for me was that the decision I made as a outlet to do that.
And how have you found it so far? Publishing your thoughts, your writing in a new vehicle or new medium?
When I first decided to get on YouTube, I felt the way I felt when I first discovered copywriting.
Oh shit.
I was like, because I went, I got like an editor or whatever now, but initially I went like, I bought like Final Cut Pro. I did all these things, bro. Every single fucking second, I was so obsessed. And I wasn't even like putting any of these videos out. I was just so obsessed with just the process itself. It just felt so fucking good. to take ideas like literally from your brain, paint a visual of those ideas, and then put them out to the world. That to me was like just straight direct response 101, and it felt more enlivening than writing copy, for instance. And I just felt like I remember telling somebody, I was like, I done fucked up. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I should have been on YouTube for the last 10 years. What the fuck was I doing? Because I just felt such a strong alignment. But even with the videos, for me, the joy is in just like creating different types. Right now, I've been just working with the editor and just mostly been, the editing has just been taking like old content that I had, but I want to test out different things, different ideas, and challenge myself and put myself out there in new ways and confront some of my, just confront myself in a very honest and real and sincere way. And YouTube is the vehicle that I'm going to use to do that.
I like to say that we're living through the printing press for audio and video right now. It's like anybody could create audio and video for the first time ever in human history. And we don't stop and think about like, yo, this is insane. And so when you say like, I should have been doing this 10 years ago. Yeah, that's like somebody getting a printing press and being like, yeah, I should have started writing my first book at 1462 instead of 1492. Right? It's like, it's the same shit. Like you could start now, you could start your podcast, you could start your video and put it on YouTube. And it'll still be the very, 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 very early stages of the medium. Because guess what? The printing press came out in 1422, I believe. And we're still writing books to this day. Something tells me people will still be creating video and audio files 100, 500, 1,000 years from now. Which is a really cool thing to think about. And reminds you just how early you really are in the medium. And yeah, it's something that just gets me so excited because I'm like, oh, these are just the early days, and we haven't seen what the truth is about these platforms really executed for tens or hundreds of years yet, like we have with books.
I think you do such a good job of putting things into the proper perspective. I remember when I read an email of yours recently, when you were talking about what the future of podcasting could look like, and I think you said something in relation to what if in the future everybody has a podcast, like they have a social media account.
Yep.
When I
It's
heard
possible.
that, I mean, when I read that, it just felt so true in the sense of where the world is heading. It just filled me with a lot of excitement and a lot of possibility for that. Like even like one idea I had when I was like reading that was like, I used to write a daily email and like put out that email like Monday to Friday, and it was like so epic. One of the ideas that I had was to like create a like same sort of style where I write the daily email, but instead of it being just a daily email, it's like a daily podcast with that same type of whatever I'm doing. And it just felt like more of a direct, real outlet as opposed to just writing a daily email, turning it into a daily podcast.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like the way what do you think of when you think of a podcast today? You think of like probably like an hour or more show of some sort, like an interview-based show. But like, what if podcasts in its final form or in its future form potentially is just like 3-minute episodes or like, you know, like 7-minute readings of emails or like just interesting ideas or snippets or just little things to get you through the day. Like what if the best show 10 years from now is like just updates their feed like 4 times a day, similar to a blog. Like we just have no clue. We just have an idea in our head of what it's supposed to be or what we think it looks like. And it's like, what if it's just not supposed to be that way at all? And the only reason we think of it this way is because we're thinking about like what a television show is like or what the ways in which people have done it in the past. But like, who's to say that's actually correct?
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so exciting. Like when I think about the podcast, like when I record episodes, the way I kind of like to see it is like I'm dialing a number to the world and now I can just speak to the world directly.
Wow.
It's like I'm having a real-time conversation with the world. I'm just picking up a phone, turning on the mic, and going at it. It's like, what's up, world?
Well, the crazy thing is just like how anybody could access it at any time. And just like I recently was putting your name in YouTube because I wanted to see your most recent YouTube videos. And I stumbled across our first podcast episode on YouTube that I uploaded. And it's got like 1,800 views, is just like the first episode we recorded. And it's just like, that's wild to think about, right? Like that's just, it was just a conversation between us that then now has just been seen so many times or listened to so many times. And it's just like, that's only after 2 years. What's it going to be like after 4? What's it going to be like after 8? What's it going to be like after 20? Right? Like the ability of a podcast or a YouTube video is that anybody can access it at any time ever. It's just infinitely superior than television or than radio from that perspective. It's like you can log on at your own disposal at your own time with your own need. And that's why I just can't stop putting stuff out, because I'm like, do you guys see the craziness of this thing that's happening? Like, do you see where this is? It just gets me so hyped, because I'm like, all right, if the first episode has now, you know, thousands upon that, way more than 1,800, because include the podcast plays as well. It's like, you know, thousands of times. Like, what's that going to be like in 10, 20, 30 years if we keep doing the work and increase the reputation on our own names and just continue building our own presence? It's just going to be crazy. And it just excites me so much.
Yeah, that is very exciting. Just the compounding nature. It's also so fascinating too, like how, when you see somebody like, for instance, with the podcast or like, I always found this crazy about like YouTube and podcasting in general. It's like when Mr. Beast put out his first video,
Yeah,
it's like I don't know how many views he got, but he probably didn't get that many views. But now if you go back, especially when YouTube had the filter section where you could oldest
I
to newest,
know.
it
I
was
know. What
so
happened to
good.
that, bro? What happened
Yeah,
to
that
that?
was that was so good. It's like how after somebody blows up, you go and want to check out their first video, right? With the
Yep.
podcast or with the YouTube channel or whatever. And I always find it fascinating how when you're building in the right vehicle that has true compounding nature, then the marketing for your first few videos or your first few podcasts are actually being done by what you're doing currently. And it's
What
happening
do you mean
all
by
the
that?
time. For instance, if Mr. Beast like puts out a video today and somebody discovers Mr. Beast for the first time and his production value on the video is so good like it is, people are like, yo, who the fuck is this guy? First they're gonna watch that video. Then they'll go on his YouTube and probably watch the second most recent video, then the third more recent. Then they'll get indoctrinated into Mr. Beast's ethos. They like his vibe. They like how he is. They'll start resonating with him. And then eventually they'll be like, man, I'm curious. How did Mr. Beast start? Then when they had the old setting, you filter oldest to newest. And now
Yep.
this video that you recorded or Mr. Beast recorded a decade ago is now collecting new views. New people are interacting with it, and it's something he produced 10 years ago. So like the shelf life on YouTube and a podcast is fucking insane compared to something like Twitter or email where you produce it once, it lives for a minute or a day, and then it's gone back into the void.
Yeah, man. And that's why I think about also the like people I'm in this weird spot right now, and I'm sure you felt this at different points in your habits where you've done a lot more work than most people, but you also see how far you have to go when you look at
Hmm.
the greats or look at what you're trying to accomplish. Like I've done 290 something podcast episodes. It's a lot more than most people, but if I think about Rogan at episode 290, like no one was watching and he was just
Hmm.
getting started, and that was just like the beginning phases of it. And so like I just find it so fascinating the specific moment that I'm in of like doing more than most but doing nothing compared to the people that I'd like to be. I just find that an interesting concept. It's an interesting point in time I don't think we often stop to think about.
Absolutely. I feel like there's such a acknowledging both. I feel like is super, super, super important. And I feel like with the podcast, I feel like one thing that I've learned in life is you can never fully predict it,
Yeah.
like obviously, right? So like what excites me the most about what you're doing is like, when you're like, you produce like 200 plus episodes and people are loving it. And when people comment on Twitter and they're like, bro, if you keep doing this is going to be like the new Rogan, right? And they kind
Yeah.
of put that into the air and they're like, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be like the number one podcast. You're going to be selling out Madison Square Garden, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the way I see that is I think it's not going to be that.
I
It's going
love
to
it.
be. Hear me out. Don't end the podcast here. I got another
Cut.
sentence.
Cut. Cut. That's it.
Clip,
Stop recording.
clip that. Please clip that. I'm just kidding. What I feel, what life has taught me is it's never what you think that's going to happen that happens. What actually happens when you truly engage fully and you truly express your greatest gifts is something that you could have never foreseen. So when I read that, I'm like, that's a given almost. But what's actually going to happen is going to be like, we're going to look back, bro, when we're like 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 120, 130, whatever. And we're going to be like, bro, remember when we thought you were going to be the next Rogan? Dude,
Yeah.
I don't mean any disrespect to Rogan, but we're going to be like, bro, compared to what actually happened, that was like the difference between seeing in color and seeing in black and white. What actually ends up happening when you're fully on the path is out of the realm of possibility that your mind can perceive, because we just think of things linearly. We look at Rogan and we're like, that's the highest, or that's the potential, or that's what it is. And then we base our potential off of that. But the way I like to see it is, bro, I'm scared to see what is going to happen because it is so outside of the normal realm of possibility, and scared in a good way. And that's what makes it so fucking exciting. Because if you know, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but if I know it would end like Rogan, or it would end in Madison Square, it would just end there, I would be like, what's the point? What's the point? What's the point? It's boring. It's boring now. There's no unknown. There's nothing. It's like that magic that makes it so enjoyable. And I think that's like honestly one of the most important things to realize, is to not limit our success based on the success we've seen of other people.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I was watching Drewski, who's been I started following him probably like a year ago, and he came up. He's a funny dude who I recently was just watching interviews with him, and people were asking him, so like, is this what you imagined? He's like, honestly, I didn't imagine like a fourth of this. Like I couldn't even have predicted this. Like this is so far beyond what I expected or what I wanted that I'm just blown away by it. And he's just starting. So it's like, it's like the levels to it. And just the unknowing is just something that like comes through for people who are at the top of the game.
Absolutely. And it feels like that's why I personally feel like labels and identities can be quite limiting, because if you perceive a reality through limits, if you perceive reality through labels and identities, then your imagination is going to be filtered through those labels and identities, and you'll end up recreating the past into the future. For instance, if I take myself to be a copywriter, and that's who I am, and I want to build a business, for instance, what I think is possible will be put into context of what other copywriters have done. I'll be like, oh, Gary Halbert once did this, or like Eugene Schwartz once did that. Like my entire imagination will be molded now based on that identity and that limit, right? But what if there's a completely new, novel way to use copywriting or direct response in a way that far exceeds what my mind thinks is possible?
Yeah.
I would never even entertain that possibility. So I like to kind of view myself as nothing, and then from there create and let reality take it where it needs to go.
We question all of our beliefs except those we never think to question, right? Is something Alex Hormozy has been quoting a lot recently. I don't know who originally quoted it, but it's like, if you have specific beliefs that you don't even question because you believe them so strongly, it's like you can never get to the place of nothing. Meaning like Twitter should be used in this capacity. It should only be used for threads and for single ideas and tweets. Well, like, what if there's a better way to use it that no one currently is thinking about? I mean, Twitter as a platform is only 16 years old. Imagine if books were only 16 years old. Like, you think the way of creating a book is going to be the same? Like, from 1437 onward? Like, of course not. Of course the medium of writing a book is going to change and evolve throughout the years. Okay, like, how do you get to be on the cutting edge of creating and thinking of those ideas? One way is to become nothing, right? Like, to literally have no beliefs. about the way it should be used or what you should do with it, because you're just existing and you're not having any preconceived notions of what it should be or what it shouldn't be into reality. Like you're just letting it flow and letting whatever comes come to you. So damn important. So damn important.
Absolutely. I feel like even like all the thinking of like first principles is just like coming back to nothingness.
Yes.
Where you can then event anew. Even like Twitter, for instance, I thought it was remarkable what Dickie from Ship 30 for 30 did with like the atomic essays and like just publishing 30 days. I was like, bro, this is fucking genius. Like nobody was doing that. And like, you know, I was like, yo, this is so cool. Like you're actually creating like more medium form content and you're putting it into one photo and you're publishing it on Twitter. And now you got a bunch of people doing this. I was like, that's cool. That's fucking something real.
And I got this from, I started doing quotes from episodes, and that turned into like one of, I think, my best performing tweet ever. And how did that come to be? Because I spoke to somebody who did it themselves. They're like, yo, I've been having great success. Shout out David Senra from Founders Podcast. I've been having great success by just putting out quotes in this specific way. And I was like, all right, I'll try it too. Like, but I never would have thought to do that before talking to him. And that's just like such a simple, easy thing to do. And so obvious now looking back, like, oh, obviously this is better than a video on Twitter. So it's just like, we just don't know how to use the platform the best yet. And that's true for Twitter. That's true for YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Like it's probably true for all of it. We don't know how to use the platform best because time will show. Like, remember when people in the like early 2010s were like how they would title videos and their thumbnails and stuff like that? It's like it just seems so prehistoric. Well, somebody in 2032 or 2042 or 2052 might be looking at the current state of affairs the same way. So
it's so fascinating too. Even like what you did with Twitter with like the publishing quotes from a podcast, and just like it's like the same information but packaged in a different way. And even what I was seeing on Instagram with Behavior Hack, bro, like it's fucking insane how he took like he's been crushing it, taking those I know he's a really good friend of yours, taking like the same tweets that he had and putting it into that crisp, clean, beautiful edited style. And it's just been remarkable to see that. It's like the same content, but just like how he leveraged something new to share the same message to touch more people was remarkable to witness.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just so exciting, like to be on the inside as he's going through that growth. Like he went from 200,000 followers to now over 500,000 in the past month, maybe in the past couple of weeks.
Sheesh.
And it's just like, that is insane. And when you hear the excitement in his voice about how much joy he's getting from creating these animations, from obsessing over the details of them, like you're just like, oh my God. And that, and that is just insane to me that it was his writing. It was the same writing that he was doing, just like slightly different packaging, slightly more engaging, like more interesting in how it's presented. It's like, oh my God. Now, like, how does somebody else recreate that for themselves? Okay, so it's like, take something that works and tweak it slightly. Like Naval had some clips that were similar to Zach's Behavior Hacks, but it's like he did his own style. He did it slightly differently. And because of that, it just got extraordinary results. So I think like the takeaway from that I got at least is like, one, it's because he's been studying media and studying writing, and he's been working at all that for now multiple years, like 3-4 years. So that's like this opportunity has come because of that. But it's also like, see what's working from somebody and see how you can potentially recreate it in a way. Like maybe don't start from scratch. Like maybe one idea is to go to nothing to create something. Another idea might be to see what works and just add one thing to it or remove one thing from it to create something better. So shit gets me so excited.
1000%. And I think it's so relevant too to what we were talking about earlier with the growth of the podcast. I think for me, what is like very exciting is like I feel like you have so much information that is juicy and valuable with the podcast that I feel like the packaging of that information is the real problem that that once solved will lead to exponential growth.
Yep, I totally agree.
And that's so exciting because the packaging is infinite, bro. You could just source ideas from all these different fields to create the best packaging, and it's constantly going to be upgrading and getting better and better and better. It may start off as like talking head clips, but morph into something completely different in a year from now.
Yep, exactly right. And that's why one suggestion Zach had was like, look at other industries that are not related at all to what you're talking about and see who's doing it best in those industries. I love that idea. Just like in business in general, or just like in life, is like, who's somebody who most people who follow your thing aren't looking at. So the first thing like I could imagine was be like beauty podcasts. Like that's like literally the first thing that comes to mind. Like nobody who's paying it. Very few people who are paying attention to my podcast, I assume, are also into beauty podcasts. But if you are, like, send them my way. Like, what are the most effective ones of those doing, right? Like, no one's thinking like that. Nobody who's creating a business or self-improvement or self-development or like no one who's creating this type of content is thinking about those things. But those things might be really, really important to think about from like marketing and packaging this thing. So just other niches, other fields.
1000%. I feel like there was like always this concept that I learned from James Altucher of like idea sex. So valuable. Taking like ideas or something from two unrelated fields and joining it is like where all the magic happens. And even with respect to what you were saying of studying other industries, I remember Jay Abraham, which is like an OG marketer that is like super, super, super dialed in and talented and successful. He would just like be able to go into markets and companies as a consultant, I believe, and just make 1 to 2 tweaks that would completely blow up the business in the best way possible. And when people would be like, yo, Jay, how did you do this? Like, you got the Midas touch. Like, how do you do this? He's like, because you only know your industry. I've studied hundreds of industries and I apply lessons and insights that I've seen work in another industry and I put it in this vehicle. Because all your competitors are only studying this industry too, it comes across as novel and unique. And since it's already proven in another industry and human beings are human beings, you experience tremendous exponential success as a result. And it feels like magic.
And this is why I've become obsessed recently with reading biographies and listening to the Founders podcast, because what I realize is I'm learning about different industries, and like I'm reading Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg's autobiography right now, and I'm just like, it's called Bloomberg by Bloomberg, and he goes into media, but before media he's into finance, and he spent 15 years, I believe, as an analyst or working on Wall Street in some capacity, and I'm just like, I'm blown away. I'm like, holy shit, like this is so crazy here. Like, and when you read a biography or autobiography, I feel like you're learning all the insights about that industry in a packageable way. So I've ordered like a bunch more. I got like Ed Thorpe's biography. I got Edwin Land's biography, like Steve Jobs' mentor. Like I'm just like devouring them, and definitely David from the Founders podcast is the one who's like, he's pushing me to do this he's not actually pushing me at all, but like from consuming so much of his content, I'm like, oh, like I see how this guy is operating and I want a little bit more of that. And I think that's what makes for a good life in general, is not that you like listen to the podcast, you're like, I want to copy everything Tej does, or I want to copy everything Danny does. But it's just like, how do you take things from people and just like be like, oh, I'd like this part of this person, or I'd like that part of that person. And I think like a good life is just figuring out the parts you want to take from other people and just applying them to your own life.
1000%. I've always found it like super interesting to see how, as your journey continues to unfold, what you're studying has also been changing. Because I remember having early conversations with you where you started off studying like good interviewers, right? Like Larry King, Tim Ferriss, so on and so forth. And then I had a conversation with you like months later, and you were like, Ted, you know what I'm super fascinated by? I'm really studying comedians right now. Right? Yeah. Then you started studying comedians. And then after, like earlier on this conversation, you were like, bro, I'm really fascinated in creativity now, studying creativity. And now like autobiographies in different industries. So it's so interesting to see how what you're studying is changing and how you're taking what you're learning from all that you're studying and infusing it to grow one thing. I think that's like very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, man. I'm so happy you brought that up in that way, because in the moment you don't realize like how each thing you're studying has or is impacting you in some way or leading you down a path, right? It's hard in the moment to be like, oh, I studied interviewers, then comedians, then musicians, then, founder. Like you just don't realize it, because in this moment I'm obsessed with this thing. So, and I don't think that it's a bad, like I think like each one builds on another and it's all serving something, like it's all leading to some place. And that's an exciting realization or place to be in. What are you studying right now?
Before I answer that, when you were talking about the autobiographies, have you read When I Stop Talking, You'll Know I'm Dead by Jerry Weintraub?
I love that book. When you stop talking, right? You'll know I'm dead. Yeah. I think you recommended it to me. And that was somebody who had felt like just lived with so much life and so much curiosity. And another common theme that I notice is like how people don't know. Like they could have this plan for mapping it out of where they're going to be. But like, if I remember correctly from Jerry Weintraub, it was just like, he had no idea the path that he would lead and like where he would go. And he didn't expect like all the crazy things to happen that did. And that's like such a exciting realization that we just don't know.
Absolutely. And it feels like even, you know, what's crazy about that book? I thought you could change the name to The Surrender Experiment and it would still hold.
That's a good insight. Yeah, that's a good point. Just because the paths that he took were just so wild. Like you just didn't know. He didn't know. He just was like, all right, this is the person I'm representing right now. All right, next, like, and just did it to the best of his ability.
That's like that's like a pattern that I see often, even with like Richard Branson's, bro, that Losing My Virginity. I remember I read that in like late high school. I was like, holy fuck, like this is it. Like, dude, I was so juiced. Like it just made me want to play the game of life with my foot completely on the gas pedal. And even his story of like, you know, starting Virgin Airlines because like he wanted to go see his girlfriend and the flight was delayed. And then he's like, fuck it, I'm just going to charter a plane and just put up a sign and board all these people and we're fucking going there. And that creates Virgin Airlines. Like that to me is, again, like an example of the surrender experiment in action. But in terms of what I'm studying, the first and foremost thing that I love to study and will continue to study forever is just people. I feel like people are the most fascinating in human nature. That's been like my number one love, is just to study the human experience by experiencing it as fully as possible myself, but also studying other human beings, both the good, bad, and the ugly, and just seeing it for what it is. That has been a lifelong study. And other things that I'm studying, it's been interesting too to see how it changed. Like one time I had a very intensive quantum physics deep dive where this all I wanted to study, bro. I was so fucking obsessed with quantum physics. Now I'm like, oh, it's cool. But like back then, it's just like all you think about. I also had a stint in studying comedians and stand-up comedians quite intensely, writers, athletes. For me, I like to study people that are excelling in different crafts and try to pick apart the patterns that are similar amongst them all. I like to hone my pattern recognition muscle because I feel like one of the greatest skills to develop is pattern recognition, especially in today's day and age where packaging, for instance, is slowly but surely becoming the variable for success. It's like creative is the variable for success, but it's the packaging of the creative that allows it to be successful. And in order to come up with the best packaging and the best creative, I think, yes, it comes from nothingness, but it also comes from honing your pattern recognition and seeing how dots connect where other people can't see those dots connect because they're not recognizing the patterns. So I feel like life is one big game of learning the patterns and implementing the patterns. So I like to personally expose myself to a variety of different things that are unrelated on the surface, but once you dig deep enough, you realize that the patterns are there.
What are some of the most common patterns you notice between successful people?
Yeah, so from like studying biographies of everybody from successful entrepreneurs to successful scientists to successful athletes and rock stars, I discovered a few things. The first thing that I discovered was a disdain for authority. That could manifest in a variety of different ways. One way it could manifest is a disregard for the status quo. Another way it could manifest is rebelling against the status quo. And ultimately, not wanting to fit into the world they were born in. Not thinking that's all there is to this and what people are telling you is what it is and just becoming a mold of that world. So the first thing was... go on.
It's funny. When I was listening to the Founders podcast, Steve Jobs was talking about how if he didn't start a company, he would end up in jail. He would end up being a delinquent. Is that how he framed it? Because he wasn't happy with the status quo. And I thought that was an interesting insight that founders are very similar to people who end up in jail.
Absolutely. I think they said the same thing for Richard Branson and also Dan Bilzerian. Either you're gonna be like super rich, super famous, or you're gonna be in fucking jail. Because even when you think about who are the people that become successful and famous, they are doing something that is attractive to us, right? The person that's living a normal cookie cutter life would not become famous because it's too common. It's not an outlier. So in order to become an outlier, you got to do things that go against conventional society. So one way you can go against conventional society is by either becoming a delinquent or channeling that same energy into creating a life that is uniquely yours on your terms. And that's what we admire, because deep down inside, we all want to do that. You know, you watch a movie where some guy was living a conventional life and he's like, fuck this. I'm going to go climb Mount Everest and I'm going to dedicate my entire life to this. Something deep inside of us resonates with that, because some of us are living a life that is very comfortable on the outside, but inside we're dying to truly live a life uniquely our own. And that's why that person becomes famous, because we recognize that quality in them and we want that quality ourselves. So disdain for authority was the number one thing that I noticed. Second thing was insatiable curiosity. Just breaking things apart, just wanting to figure out the truth, just wanting to know for the sake of knowing. I remember... I'm going to butcher his name. I think Richard Feynman. I don't know his last.
Richard Feynman.
Yeah.
Feynman.
Yes. Like, I remember reading that book and I was like, holy fuck. Like, this person was so curious, and he was like, employing his curiosity towards like science. And there was like one example of like picking up girls or something. Like he was just so curious about everything that it was like bleeding off of the pages. His curiosity, you could just feel it and sense it. And I think if you have an insatiable curiosity mixed with a disdain of authority, you end up creating things that are for this world but not of this world, because you are no longer subscribed to the same dogma that limits the deep down ideas that are dying to come through you. So those two things I've noticed in a lot of things. And then there's other practical things, like, for instance, in the book Three Simple Steps, the author Trevor Blake also read a lot of biographies, and he noticed common patterns of successful people were more individuals. So again, disdain of authority, to spend time in nature because it would allow them to get in tune with what it is they're truly feeling and sensing and experiencing, or some type of meditative practice. For instance, Einstein took a lot of naps. Nikola Tesla used to solve a lot of problems in his imagination, cut off from the world. He wouldn't even put anything into action until he could actually visualize the problem being solved completely in his head. And after that, he would implement it. So a lot of the similarities I notice are sometimes things that the average person deems to be woo-woo. But I think the woo-woo is not woo-woo. I think the woo-woo is actually something deeper. And just because you can't understand it doesn't make it woo-woo. It's just something you can't understand at this point. It's like Dave Chappelle. He's like, it's easy to call somebody you don't relate to or agree with crazy. But what if you just don't understand their life experience?
Yeah, this is, I think, one of my most important realizations from the past year, is that so much of knowledge is just having a clearer picture of the thing. And we often use blanket statements when we don't have clear knowledge about the thing. Because think about, like, all right, if I know one person from Canada, well, then I can label that one person representing all Canadians, and my assumptions are likely going to be incorrect. But if like you know hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people in Canada, you're going to have a much clearer picture of what's someone from Vancouver like, what's someone from this part of Vancouver like, what's someone from Montreal like, what's someone from Toronto. And so you have a much clearer picture of all the ways, and that's more knowledge. And so similar to not understanding someone, you call them crazy. It's like, well, maybe if you just ask more questions and understood them at a deeper perspective by getting to know them and having more knowledge about them, you'd have a much clearer picture of who they actually were, and you wouldn't label it with one large way of being.
Absolutely. It's so true, because even myself, I fall victim to it too. I think I posted a tweet a long time. I remember
the world is too complex. We have to do this inherently, but it's just important to stop and realize too.
Absolutely. I remember like I would follow like people, like spiritual accounts on Twitter, for instance, that were like very tapped in, and they would like tweet something, and I would be like, yo, this person is fucking lost their mind. They're fucking insane. What the fuck are they talking about? Right? And then like 2-3 years later, I reread those tweets again, and I was like, holy fuck, this person was tapped in. I was the crazy one, not them.
Is there an example that comes to mind?
No, not like a specific example, but just like various realizations and various insights. Even like saying things like, you can the part of you that is the most true is the part of you that is outside time and space. Like I would read that 2 years ago. I'd be like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about, outside time and space? Have you lost your mind? Like, it just sounds so, like, what is that? What does that even mean? That's why, like, I don't even, I feel like it doesn't even do anything. Like, it's cool to like say that, but like, what does it even mean, you know? And it sounds crazy to somebody that's just living a normal life, that has a lot of problems, that is going through a lot of suffering. It's like, yeah, maybe, but like, what does that do for me now? Nothing. But so it sounds crazy based on that level of awareness, right? Even I noticed this is kind of interesting, but So you know how Kanye recently had his little podcast run,
Yeah, of course.
and he kind of went crazy, or like whatever he was saying.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me to, for instance, the latest thing that he was saying on Alex Jones when he was like, "I love Hitler," for instance, right? I
Yeah.
thought what he said is both right and wrong depending on what level of awareness you're perceiving that information from. So if you take yourself to be an individual island and I'm separate from you and you're separate from me and my personality and my character is all there is to me and conventional reality is the only reality and there's nothing deeper to us, then saying I love Hitler is fucking disgusting. It's bullshit. It's, are you fucking serious? How could you say that? Right? That's like, if people perceive it through that lens, it makes perfectly good sense why they would react like that. Now imagine you, and it's not like one is better than the other. I just think how the same statement can be perceived in different ways. So now imagine you go deeper and you start to realize what Ram Dass realized. I remember Ram Dass gave a talk a very long time ago when he's like, just love everything. And somebody in the crowd raised their hand and they're like, just love everything? What about Hitler, Ram Dass? What about murderers and rapists and pedophiles? What about them, Ram Dass? And he just sits there silent with love in his eyes. He's vibing. You can tell he's like really, really tapped in. And he's like, just love everything. And what I found interesting about what Kanye said was he said, I love Hitler. And he also said how his mom died in the hospital while a doctor was giving her or conducting surgery on her. I forgot the doctor's name. But he's like, I also love him. I also love Ari Emanuel. I also love all these people that were causing him pain and suffering. And then I was thinking about what Jesus said when he was like, love thy neighbor. And then I was like, what if your neighbor's Hitler, Jesus? And as I was going deeper with this, I was like, if you perceive it on different levels of consciousness, for instance, if you think what they mean when they say just love Hitler or like a rapist or a murderer is their exterior form, then I don't think that's what Jesus actually meant when he said love thy neighbor. I think he meant love the truth of them, even if they don't see the truth in themselves. So if you're loving the truth of them, you're loving the same truth that is inside you. So from that place, the only logical conclusion you can arrive at is what Ram Dass said when he said, just love everything. But of course, to a person that is not on that level, and it's not a higher level or lower level, they'll hear that and it doesn't make sense because you're perceiving everything as separate from you and yourself to be an independent entity and for your exterior form to be all there is to you. So I just found that interesting how based on different levels, the same message can be perceived in different ways and can be used to ignite hate, which I think is the default because most people just perceive it through that lens, or there's a deeper meaning behind the words simultaneously.
Dude, you explained that so well. And I'm so grateful for you for just explaining it the way you did, because it's easy to take something like that out of context, Kanye's statement, and also like paint the narrative in your heart the way that the media or other people paint it. And because it's easy to do that because you don't have to think, and it's like, why would you even think when somebody says something so crazy like that or feels so crazy? And so like you breaking it down for me in that way just really help me come to new understandings of what potentially it meant without judging, which is just, I have a lot of love in my heart for you for helping me come to greater understanding just in that moment. So thank you.
Much love, brother. That's beautiful to hear.
I think this is a perfect place to come to a close with this podcast and wrap this up and land the plane, because I think this might be the longest one I've ever recorded, and who better than with you? Is there a challenge you'd like to leave people with? To, they listen to us for 2.5 hours. So is there a challenge we can leave people with while they do the next thing in their day?
It's funny when you said challenge, the first thing that I thought of was just love everything. I'm like, nah, that's too cheesy right off the bat. But the challenge that I would conclude this with is try to reach the top of the world, whatever that means, for yourself, while practicing the utmost kindness and compassion for yourself. Don't even worry about other people. Just focus on yourself. Because sometimes it's like, there's two ways to orient yourself to your experience. One is like with harsh judgments, where you're like, you're a piece of shit. You can never do anything wrong. You're so lousy. Come on, other people are beating you. What's wrong with you? So on and so forth. You try to get yourself to take action from that place. One of judgment and harshness that feels very nasty and like you're constructing violence on yourself. And the other way is by being a very good friend to yourself. So the challenge that I would leave people with is befriend yourself truly, and view yourself through the most compassionate eyes possible. And that doesn't mean that you give into laziness or you procrastinate. It means if you're feeling lazy, instead of judging yourself, become curious. Why am I feeling lazy? What's going on with me? Maybe you'll find a deeper truth that puts all truths into perspective and takes you back home as a result. So practice compassion and reach the top of the world, and enjoy the video game of life.
Tej Dosa, ladies and gentlemen, at Comedic Bizman on Twitter, Instagram, now on YouTube as well, all linked below. Thank you so much, Tej.
Thank you, brother.